The alarm clock blared. Another blasted morning. I swear the devil himself invented mornings. Just another cruel reminder that the world keeps spinning, even when you wish it wouldn't. I hit the snooze button, craving just 5 more minutes of blissful unconsciousness. The insistent chirping started again. "Fine, I'm up!" I threw back the covers, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. I stumbled to the bathroom, catching my reflection in the mirror. Bloodshot eyes, messy hair, the face of a man who hadn't made peace with mornings. Little did I know, mornings were about to become the least of my problems. I went through the motions of getting ready. But hey, a man's got to maintain some standards, right? Stepping outside, the air felt different. Heavy. A strange stillness hung in the air, broken only by the distant moan of a car alarm. Must be my imagination, I thought. The world was always a little off-kilter after downing a pot of coffee on an empty stomach. I squinted at the rising sun, its rays painting the sky in hues of sickly yellow and bruised purple. Even the sunrise looked hungover today. Then I saw them. Across the street, shuffling figures with vacant eyes and mouths frozen in grotesque snarls. They moved with a disconcerting jerkiness, like puppets with their strings tangled. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't some elaborate prank. This was real. The dead were walking, and they were hungry. The world as I knew it had just ended, and I was standing on the welcome mat. Days blurred into weeks. My once familiar neighborhood had transformed into a desolate wasteland. Buildings stood empty, their windows like vacant eyes staring out at the carnage. The air hung thick with the stench of decay, a constant reminder of the horrors that now roamed the earth. Home was no longer a place of comfort, but a rusty haven on 4 wheels. I'd claimed an abandoned car in a junkyard as my own. It wasn't much, but the dented metal shell provided a semblance of shelter from both the elements and the relentless undead. The seats were ripped and smelled faintly of mildew, but they were a damn sight more comfortable than sleeping on the cold, hard ground. The junkyard had become my own personal fortress. The rusted hulks of forgotten vehicles formed a makeshift wall, keeping the worst of the horde at bay. Every day was a struggle for survival, a desperate fight to see the sunrise. Food was scarce, water even more so. But I was a survivor. I scavenged for scraps, raided abandoned stores, and learned to make do with whatever I could find. My most prized possession, a battered hockey stick, its wooden shaft reinforced with scavenged metal scraps. It wasn't pretty, but it got the job done. I swung the hockey stick with grim determination, each thud a small victory in the face of overwhelming odds. Braining zombies wasn't exactly how I pictured spending my days, but hey, you gotta adapt, right? The trick was to aim for the head, to silence the gnawing hunger that drove them. It wasn't easy. These weren't your slow, lumbering movie monsters. These things were fast, relentless, and surprisingly strong. Each encounter was a dance with death, one wrong move, one misstep, and I'd be joining their ranks. They were everywhere, a tide of decaying flesh driven by an insatiable hunger. They shambled through the streets, their moans a constant haunting symphony. The stench of rot clung to them like a shroud, a grim reminder of their former humanity. They were relentless, their hunger a force of nature. Walls couldn't hold them. Fences were mere suggestions. Their hunger knew no bounds. I'd seen them tear through flesh with terrifying ease. The sickening crunch of bone, the wet tearing of muscle. It was a sight that haunted my nightmares, a constant reminder of my own mortality. I couldn't let them get close, couldn't let them get their teeth on me. One bite, that's all it took. One bite and I'd be one of them, another mindless drone in their macabre army. They swarmed, a tide of grasping limbs and snapping jaws. Paranoia was the price of survival in this new world. My eyes stung, sweat dripped down my face, blurring my vision. Damn this sun, damn this heat. I adjusted the welder's goggles perched on my forehead, their tinted glass providing a much-needed respite from the glare. They were a lucky find, scavenged from a hardware store weeks ago. Now they were an essential part of my survival kit. The goggles did more than just protect my eyes from the sun. They shielded me from the sight of the undead. Their vacant eyes, their rotting flesh, it was all too much to bear sometimes. The goggles provided a a filter that allowed me to see the world in shades of grey, muting the horror that surrounded me. It was a small mercy, but in this new world, every little bit helped. The memories haunted me, flashes of a life before, a life that seemed like a distant dream now. My brother's face etched in my mind, his laughter, his smile gone forever. Taken by the horde in the early days, before I truly understood the threat we faced. I could still hear his voice calling my name as the undead swarmed him. I could still feel the searing pain of his loss, a constant ache in my chest. It was my fault. I should have been there. I should have protected him. The guilt gnawed at me, fueling my rage, my will to survive. I carried his memory with me, a heavy burden and a source of strength. He wouldn't want me to give up. I had to keep fighting. The flames danced and swirled, a hypnotic ballet of destruction. The air crackled with heat, the smoke stinging my eyes even through the welder's goggles. But I didn't care. The fire meant safety, at least for now. It meant keeping the horde at bay, their mindless hunger momentarily forgotten in the face of the inferno. I'd learned early on that fire was a double-edged sword. It could provide warmth and light, but it could also draw unwanted attention. The undead were drawn to light, to sound, to anything that hinted at the presence of the living. But fire was different. It terrified them. The crackling flames, the intense heat, it stirred something primal in their decaying brains, something akin to fear. A well-placed Molotov cocktail could clear a path through a horde, buying me precious time to escape. The wail of the siren cut through the oppressive silence like a razor. It was a sound that sent chills down my spine, a sound that meant trouble. But it was also a sound that could save my life. The undead were drawn to noise, their dulled senses attracted to anything that broke the monotony of their existence. A siren, even a dying one, was like a beacon to them. I'd found the old police cruiser weeks ago, its battery long dead, but its siren still functional. I'd hot-wired the ignition, the engine sputtering to life before dying with a groan. No matter, I didn't need it to drive. I just needed the siren. The undead surged towards the sound, their moans growing louder as they drew closer. I melted back into the shadows, watching as the horde swarmed the police cruiser, their attention diverted from my location. The hospital loomed before me, a concrete monolith against the desolate landscape. It was a beacon of hope and a den of horrors all rolled into one. I'd heard whispers on the wind, rumors of a group of survivors holed up inside. They were desperate, low on supplies and in need of a miracle. One of them was a kid, barely more than a girl, pregnant, scared out of her mind. She needed medicine, supplies, a fighting chance for her and her unborn child. I couldn't just stand by and let them die. I had to try, even if it meant facing my worst fears, even if it meant walking into the belly of the beast. The hospital was a death trap. The undead roamed the halls, their moans echoing through the empty wards. I saw her then, the girl, her eyes wide with terror, her hand clutching her swollen belly. She was trapped, surrounded by the horde, her hope fading with every passing second. I had to act fast. I had to be the distraction. I charged into the fray, my modified hockey stick singing a song of death. The undead swarmed me, their hunger a palpable force. I fought with the fury of a man possessed, each swing of my weapon a desperate prayer. I wouldn't let them take her. Not while I still drew breath. They dragged me down, a tide of decaying flesh and snapping jaws. I felt their teeth tear into my flesh, felt the searing pain of their hunger. But even as the darkness closed in, I saw her. She was safe, escaping through a side door, her hand reaching out as if to grab mine. The world faded to black, but in that final moment I found peace. I'd made a difference. I'd saved her. And in the end, that's all that mattered. The alarm clock blared. Another blasted morning.